Chinese warplanes continue to cross the Taiwan Strait median line as a wave of unprecedented military exercises take place. Taiwan's opposition party, the KMT, sends a delegation to China, triggering condemnation. Lured by fake job ads, this time in Dubai, prosecutors detained 2 people for suspected human smuggling. Also ahead.
I'm James Chaser here at the National Kaohsiung Center for the Arts, one of the largest performing arts spaces in Asia. I'll be finding out from the center's director how places like this are changing Taiwan's artistic landscape.
Hello and welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Divya Gopalan. It is good to have your company. So we begin with the ongoing military exercises where Chinese warplanes and ships are continuing to operate around Taiwan as Beijing puts the pressure on the country. The military drills are an objection to U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taipei last week. Mayoral has this update.
Taiwan's defense ministry says around 10 Chinese Navy ships and more than 40 warplanes were still near Taiwan as of Tuesday afternoon. 16 fighter jets crossed over the median line of the Taiwan Strait. The median line is an unofficial boundary created by the U.S. in the 1950s that separates Taiwan and China. Taiwan's military says it's continuing to monitor the situation, scrambling its own aircraft and deploying missile defense systems. Kaohsiung and Hainan for TaiwanPlus.
Well, for its part, Taiwan has continued its live-fire artillery drills for a second day in the southern county of Pingtung. These exercises aim to test Taiwan's ability to defend itself, especially its coast. Now, the weapons being used include the U.S.-made howitzer for firing shells, which Taiwan is expected to buy more of in the coming years. U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, meanwhile, has defended her visit to Taipei, telling American TV network NBC that her trip was absolutely worth it. Now, in other news, the vice chairperson of Taiwan's largest opposition party, the Kuomintang or KMT, has left for a controversial trip to China. Andrew Shah will visit Shanghai and several other cities in a trip that's been denounced by Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council as ill-timed. Rick Laurt has the details.
Unlikely timing for a Taiwanese political leader to make a trip to China. But the vice chair of the country's largest opposition party is flying to southeastern Fujian province. Andrew Shah's Kuomintang visit comes as relations across the strait are at their most delicate in decades. Taiwan has accused China of a gross violation of the country's rights, with unprecedented military exercises around the island. The continuing military drills were launched in objection to a visit by US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Last week, she became the highest-level US official to set foot in Taipei in 25 years. Shah says it is his party's duty to keep the lines of communication with China open.
6月就开始规划，我们去聆听在大陆工作的朋友们的这个心声，适时的、有尊严的替他们反映。
China is still Taiwan's largest trading partner, and more than 100,000 Taiwanese work in China, Hong Kong, and Macau. Though this number has been declining, it is one of the last points of connection across the strait. China ended official communication with Taiwan in 2016 after President Tsai of the independence-leaning Democratic Progressive Party unseated the Kuomintang or KMT, which favours a closer relationship with China. On Tuesday, Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council, which oversees relations with China, condemned the KMT visit.
此时此刻，绝非我政党等人士赴中国大陆交流的适当时机，因为此举将造成我国内社会的争议，民众高度的疑虑不安，及影响我内部团结的民心士气，更将混淆了误导国际社会对台湾面对威胁挑战的认知。
The KMT says they hope to get answers for Taiwanese business people affected by recent trade bans by China, another response to the Pelosi visit. But the prospect of more communication and exchanges with an ever more belligerent China does not play well with many of Taiwan voters.
We're talking about a party that in recent polls only has about a 14+% popularity or people who identify with it. So at the moment, they're just not a force, and these kinds of struggles that they seem to have. How friendly should we be towards the idea of dialogue or unification? At the moment, it just doesn't seem relevant to most voters in Taiwan.
Local elections in Taiwan are now just months away. China and the way the country's two major parties plan to deal with it could be the deciding factor. Rick Yi and Rick Lowett for TaiwanPlus.
China has rejected a shipment from Taiwan because its place of origin was not labeled as Taiwan, China. Since 2015, Beijing has required that all shipments from Taiwan be labeled in a way that affirms China's claims over the island. But Taiwan authorities won't let outgoing shipments carry Beijing's preferred wording. So China's decision to block the goods comes as cross-strait relations deteriorate following U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's recent visit. China has retaliated in other ways too, including a temporary ban on imports of more than 1,000 Taiwanese food companies. Prosecutors in the southern city of Kaohsiung say at least 22 people were lured to Dubai with the promise of jobs that didn't exist and then were abused. They've detained 2 people. As Louise Watt reports, it's just the latest in a case of Taiwanese finding themselves trapped after responding to fake job postings.
This clip, provided by Taiwan prosecutors, shows a suspected human trafficker abusing a victim with a stun gun. The victim tries to avoid the shocks, but they continue. Kaohsiung prosecutors investigated and have arrested 2 suspects and called 22 victims as witnesses.
为求高薪受骗至杜拜，在当地从事大陆人士所开设之机房进行诈骗。
The investigation showed victims were lured by job ads on Facebook offering free lodging and flights to Dubai, as well as bonuses and earnings of more than $30,000 in half a year. But after they got to Dubai, their movements were controlled, and if they didn't perform well or tried to escape, they were punished.
动辄遭上铐拘禁、殴打、电击或虐待等不人道待遇。
Earlier this year, it was revealed that many Taiwanese who had gone to Cambodia after answering job postings ended up being forced to work for criminal gangs. After this latest case, officials are sounding warnings again, reminding people to be wary of high-paying jobs overseas that seem too good to be true. Chris Ma and Louise Watt for TaiwanPlus.
Now, more than 100 COVID testing sites are being dismantled as demand for PCR tests drop. Taiwan's epidemic task force is also scrapping a PCR test requirement for everyone arriving in the country starting from next week. COVID cases here are continuing to stabilize, and as Eric Gao reports, some businesses are reaping the benefits.
After over a year in operation, 114 community COVID testing sites across Taiwan are being closed. There has been less of a need for lab-based PCR tests since the government began accepting self-administered rapid test results to confirm infections.
目前的 PCR 需求已经不在了，所以主要是因为这个因素，因为耗掉这个医疗人员的一个设置的人力。
With fewer COVID-positive cases, manpower all around is doing much better. The number of people forced to take unpaid leave from work because companies were seeing less business has gone down to 18.6 thousand, down 2.6 thousand compared to the week before. Restaurants especially are bringing staff back as customers return in droves.
我们的内用客人回来了，内用还有做套餐，个人套餐，然后餐盒，然后我们还有做熊猫，这3个开下去的话，说真的。
Despite the recovery in the restaurant sector, the tourism industry remains the hardest hit. Almost 9,000 people are on furlough from travel agencies alone.
国门国境也还没有开放，那虽然国内旅游有因为补助有上升的一些业绩，但是国内旅游的业绩没办法支撑你从业人员的一些规模，多人还是会有减班休息、无薪休假的情况。
Taiwan labor officials say things should improve for tourism operators once the country relaxes border restrictions. But Government officials have yet to set a timeline for when that might be. Chris Ma and Eric Gao for TaiwanPlus.
And a very different picture in China, which has expanded COVID lockdowns in the southern island province of Hainan. More than 1,800 infections have been recorded this month in the tourist hotspot. Now, these recent lockdowns have stranded almost 180,000 visitors and millions of residents. Hainan authorities say only tourists that show negative tests are allowed to leave the island. Other people can only step out of their homes for COVID tests, grocery shopping, and jobs classified as essential. China is the last major economy to adhere to a zero-COVID policy. Taiwan's courts are getting ready to switch over to a new system that will see ordinary people act as judges in certain trials. Now, Taipei has just held its final mock selection process for these so-called citizen judges to test the system. John Mantrias has the details.
In this Taipei courtroom, a prosecutor and a defense lawyer are asking 39 people where they stand on certain issues.
请问您是否认同无罪推定原则？
我想请问一下，无罪推定原则是指，没有证据显示他有罪，他就是无罪，是这样意思。
This is all part of a final practice run. From January 1st, Taiwan will adopt a jury-like system. At first for homicide cases, but later for cases where the accused faces at least 10 years in prison. Unlike jury systems elsewhere, Taiwan's will see 3 career judges sit in a panel alongside 6 carefully selected citizen judges.
诉讼当事人自己还是希望有一个公正无私的这个审判的这个过程，所以在借由这个询问程序去了解每个人心中的一些想法。
A guilty verdict will need 2/3 agreement, which must include at least one of the career judges. And a majority will need to agree on the sentence. Certain groups of people will be excluded from the selection process, such as police officers. But most Taiwan citizens over 23 can be called up at any time if they've lived in the same jurisdiction for 4 months. Courts across Taiwan have held more than 100 mock trials to test the new system out. Now the practice is over, the countdown to the new system begins. Kama Xu and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen traveled to the northern port city of Keelung on Tuesday to join the country's largest Ghost Festival celebrations. The Keelung Ghost Festival is being held for the first time since the COVID-19 pandemic began 2 years ago. Now, Tsai was there for the lantern lighting ceremony. The illuminations are intended to help guide spirits back to the world of the living, to enjoy a lavish feast and performances of traditional opera. According to folk custom, the 7th month of the lunar calendar marks the time when the barrier between the realms of the living and the dead opens. And beware, ghosts wander the earth. The gates to the afterlife tradition are located at a temple on Keelung Harbor. Tsai said the event is an important element of Taiwan's cultural heritage.
中元祭的精神象征着族群的融合，凝聚了我们对这块土地的认同，不仅是基隆人生活中不可或缺的一部分，也是台湾很重要的文化资产。
Jian Wenbing, the director of Taiwan's National Kaohsiung Center for the Arts, has begun his second 4-year term as the center's chief. Now, the venue known as Weiwuying opened in 2018 under Jian's leadership, energizing the cultural environment of the southern port city of Kaohsiung. Our reporter James Chater spoke with Jian about the center and the qualities of Taiwan society it reflects.
This is the National Kaohsiung Center for the Arts, known in Taiwan as Weiwuying. Beneath its undulating canopy sits an opera house, a concert hall, a playhouse and a recital hall, making the 1.5 million square foot complex the world's largest arts center under one roof. But for Jian Wenbing, the center's director, Weiwuying has a more everyday function for Taiwan's southern city of Kaohsiung.
它就是应该是一个客厅啊，还说这个就应该是高雄人的客厅。那你去一个人家的 living room， 你会做什么事情，就应该在这里发生。
Jian Wenbing has led the center since it opened in 2018 and has just begun his second 4-year term as director. Integrating art with public life has defined his leadership.
我们希望把那个 arts 跟 life， 或是说 people and performance， 把它拉近。 好，所以它在建筑上面它已经有这种特性，其实就是鼓励大家来，就是艺术其实真的没有那么远。好，那这个就要讲到你说，就说魏武营它的整个的设计，包括为什么它是一个 vineyard style 的 concert hall， 它其实就是要让听众在里面 ，audience 在里面觉得跟舞台上面的距离是 close 的。
In a vineyard concert hall, seats surround the stage, diluting the distinction between artist and audience. It's the logic that underpins the entire space. Airy hallways beneath the centre are open 24 hours a day, and a huge outdoor theatre rises from surrounding green parks. It's architecture, Jen says, that embodies the spirit of a freer Taiwan, which completed its democratization in the 1990s after several decades of martial rule.
在21世纪尤其是政党轮替之后产生的这个东西，它就是完全不同的理念所生出来的。那在魏武营这一栋建筑，它真的是代表的就是自由跟平等跟民主开放的。
And Jen believes it's that democratic society that opens possibilities to blur the boundary between public and artist. But I wonder what's the example, since you started at Weiwuying, that you're most proud of that demonstrates
the public
that kind of disintegration of that boundary.
就是我们的钢琴对，我觉得它已经变成是魏武营的心脏。
Weiwuying's piano is in one of the public hallways, open for anyone to play.
就像去年疫情很严重的时候，我们就是全部都停了嘛。那我们的钢琴当然也因为怕大家聚集，所以钢琴也收起来。所以后来他们说要重新开的时候，他们说那我们要做什么？我说钢琴要推出来。我说钢琴的声音，这台钢琴的声音开始响起，才代表魏武营重新开。
And it's the potential for public engagement with art encapsulated by the piano that defines the work of Jianwenbin and the center.
你只要有勇气做下去，那在那一个瞬间，他的生命就有了钢琴的声音了。那我觉得说，我们魏武营的意义就是，尤其是在这里，我们是应该努力的去创造很多类似这样子的机
会。Weiwuying's openness reflects the society it emerged from, but it's their effort to remind visitors of their own artistic potential that means the trip to Weiwuying continues long after you've left. Piper Yu, Maggie May, Patrick Chen, and James Chater for TaiwanPlus.
Now here's a piece of news that's sure to excite some music fans. K-pop group Blackpink is set to perform in the southern city of Kaohsiung next year. Now the band, consisting of members Jisoo, Jennie, Rosé and Lisa, is one of the biggest musical acts in the world. They've racked up over 1 billion views on YouTube. The March 18 show in Kaohsiung is expected to be part of a world tour that's due to start in Seoul in October, and it will finish in Auckland in June. Blackpink last performed in Taiwan in 2019. That's when they held a concert right here in Taipei. So we're going to take a break now, but there's plenty more ahead, including a story about a devastating harvest which is leaving oyster farmers in despair. Stay with us.
What makes this island nation exceptionally punch way above its might? It's the fascinating human stories we heard, plus the greatest movies we saw. The enduring and painstaking past we learned, plus the beautiful people we met. The delightful cuisines we tasted, plus the coexistence of many cultures we embraced. The powerful, energizing technology we invented, plus the ancient masterpieces we preserved. The human rights we advanced, plus the motherland we called home. TaiwanPlus. we will continue to show you unheard, compelling stories that touch our hearts. Come with us as we embark on yet another unraveling journey to the world.
Hello again, you're watching Taiwan Plus. So a candidate in November's local elections in Taiwan says he will not quit the race despite losing his master's degree in a plagiarism scandal. Ryan Ho-Kilpatrick explains.
Pressing on, Lin Zhejian says he is still in the running for mayor of Taoyuan, despite being found guilty of plagiarism by National Taiwan University and stripped of his master's degree.
有没有这个学位对于我参选桃园市长其实并没有影响。
The former mayor of Hsinchu is slated to run for the ruling Democratic Progressive Party, or DPP, in the neighboring city of Taoyuan. But his campaign has been beset by scandals over the shoddy construction of a new baseball field in Hsinchu and accusations of academic plagiarism. Now, a panel at his former university have substantiated those accusations.
台大一定坚持学术伦理与诚信的标准，维护近百年的学术名誉。社会大众要信任台大处理学术事务的能力，也尊重台大的专业判断。
Lin maintains his innocence and says he is the victim of a politically motivated smear campaign. For now, his party is standing by him.
我觉得我非常的无辜哦，我实在是一个受害者哦。
In spite of the mounting criticism against him, Lin says he's in the race until the end. Ryan Ho-Kilpatrick for TaiwanPlus.
Now, US President Joe Biden has signed a major bill to boost the country's semiconductor manufacturing and development.
We are the United States of America, a singular place of possibilities. I'm not going to go sign the Chips and Science Act, and once again, I promise you, we're leading the world again for the next decades.
The CHIPS Act, as it's called, writes into law a $280 billion package to revive innovation in the tech sector. Around $53 billion of that is carved out for subsidies for the domestic semiconductor industry. Now, due to global supply chain issues, a chip shortage has hit multiple industries. That includes cars, weapons, and even home appliances. Taiwan currently dominates the world's semiconductor manufacturing industry. This bill also provides $200 billion for scientific research to compete with China's advances in high-tech industries. Now, the death toll from record rainfall that has swamped South Korea's capital has risen to 9, with more than a dozen others injured. The downpours flooded homes, roads, and subway stations, forcing hundreds to evacuate. Authorities have suspended all public transportation in Seoul. Some areas of the city received the highest rainfall in 80 years. Authorities are now warning of the risk of flash floods and landslides, with the rainfall expected to continue until Thursday. Now, Chile says it will impose sanctions and fines on those responsible for a massive sinkhole near a copper mine in the country's north. Now, will you look at that? Well, the sinkhole appeared in late July and is now over 36 meters across. That's big enough to swallow Frank's Arc de Triomphe. Authorities are working with the mine operator to determine what triggered the collapse. Local officials want harsh penalties to set a precedent for the mining industry violations. Oysters are a staple of Taiwanese cuisine, but diners around the country may have to cut back. Unusually hot weather has devastated this year's harvest. Tash Butler has more.
Oyster farmers in Hainan pick through the day's harvest. Just 2 years ago, the coastal lagoons here in southwestern Taiwan produced more than $12 million worth of oysters. But this year's harvest will fall far short of that mark. The intense summer heat has ravaged the crop.
天气安尼较冷冷，安尼较拄好。这个7、8月啊，这种9的这阵哦，你若上过热哦，这个别卡的呢。
巨无霸大生蚝的大概养第2年就会到这样等级的大小，可是今年养第2年它还是大概是这样的等级而已。今年的产量像现在是盛产期啊，大概 科农采收上来的那个产量大概在往年的1到2成。
Experts say climate change is to blame.
就是受到极端气候的影响啊。那渔民也有反映说，可能就是那个，因为他们养殖的环境的变化了，可能就是海水的适合养殖牡蛎的条件有改变啊。
Taiwan's local oyster market is already suffering from competition with cheap imports from Vietnam. Signs this year of a ruined harvest will do little to ease farmers' woes. James Rayner and Stash Butler for TaiwanPlus.
It feels like the end of an era. Tennis superstar Serena Williams has announced that she's retiring from the sport. In the latest issue of Vogue magazine, Williams wrote her farewell to the game, saying, quote, "My goodness, do I enjoy tennis, but now the countdown begins." The 23-time Grand Slam singles champion confirmed on Instagram that she'll walk away from the sport in the next few weeks. Serena was knocked out of Wimbledon last month in the first round. She plans to hang up her rackets after the US Open, which kicks off in New York later this month. And that's it from us here. I'm Divya Gopalan. From me and the TaiwanPlus News team, thank you for watching. And finally, we'll leave you with some images of the first cat hotels in Riyadh. That's the capital city of Saudi Arabia. Remember, for more stories from Taiwan and around the world, do download the TaiwanPlus app. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.